Good evening everyone. Today we will give an introduction to TradingView, the platform, to what it is and to how you can use TradingView to better your trading. Yesterday I made a Dutch video that consists of two parts about TradingView. It was a brief introduction about the tools that are more famous and used often in TradingView. And I figured it would be also a good thing to explain this in English as well. So let's begin. So first off, what is TradingView exactly? TradingView is a charting platform on which you're able to chart several securities to trade. So for example, you can look at stocks. So the more famous one, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, etc. You can pick up the price and you can see in a nice, neatly way how the developments of price were throughout the years. This is possible for various submarkets, so for futures, for forex, crypto, indices, bonds, and even for certain American data. So these are not things you can just trade on, but it is in a similar way presented to you visually about how the data has developed throughout the years. One of the alternatives of TradingView is MetaTrader 4, and this is used specifically for forex and commodities. If we look at MetaTrader 4, we see that there are more possibilities charting wise for free. So for example, there is no low indicator limit at which there is for TradingView. So for the free version, you're only allowed to use 3 indicators. I used the cheapest paid version simply because this exactly is good for my needs, for my trading needs. But even then, I'm limited to only 5 indicators. And with MetaTrader 4, this limit is not as low, so this is one of the good things. But for me, the main problem with MetaTrader is simply that it feels unintuitively to use, and it's way less visually appealing as opposed to TradingView. So if we look at a chart on MetaTrader, for example, we see that it looks something like this. And I find this way less appealing to look at than this. So this is one of the reasons I use TradingView, and also the tools that are available at TradingView are very intuitively usable, so it's a great thing. And last but not least, there is loads and loads and loads of data available on TradingView for all these different securities that I just explained about. If we start with the possible tools on TradingView, one of the more often used tools is the Trendline. And with the Trendline, you're able to make a line that, in essence, gives a specific feeling for a trend. So, for example, if you place it below the lows or above the highs, then we're able to see a specific trend forming, and it's simply a way to visually demonstrate how this movement goes. And the good thing about making those trend lines is that it is possible to change it exactly as how you want it. So you can give it another color, you can make it thicker, you can give the color a lower opacity, so it's more transparent as opposed to the full color. And there are even some statistics that you can apply as well. So for example, if you compare the first to the last coordinate of the trend line, you see that there is a decrease of 4% and this many pips, for example. Also, if you look at the amount of bars, it's also something that's possible to see. So it takes 175 bars. In this specific example, these are days. So 175 days between the first and the second coordinate. And in that way, there's possible to show certain statistics if it's desired to do so, of course. And one of the things I use as well, but this is what I use for the horizontal line, is the text. And so you're able to type something above or below the trend line in order to visually demonstrate something important. Next, we can look at the horizontal level that I just mentioned earlier. And if we look at the horizontal level, we see that this is in particular a good way to mark a certain key level, a certain key price level. This is how I use it quite often. So I have certain ways of doing so. I mark the daily, weekly and monthly levels that are important to watch. And also, if we look at the point of control, there is a specific template that I saved for this, at which the line is a bit thicker, as you can see. It's a bit thicker and it's in red. And the reason I do this is all on a visual basis, so that I'm able to see the point of control quicker than the rest. The next thing that I use as well is a rectangle. And the reason I use a rectangle is mostly for different things. So one of the things, for example, would be to mark a bullish or bearish order block. So for example, if we mark a bullish order block, and in that way I'm able to visually demonstrate where the order block was. Since there are quite a lot of tools that you can use, it's also advised to favorite some of them, so to mark them as your favorites. And as you can see, I marked my tools as favorite as well. And you can see the trend line, the Fibonacci retracement, horizontal level or horizontal line, etc, etc. These are the tools that I use most often compared to the other tools that are available. That way I'm able to simply look at the sidebar and immediately press the desired tool to use. One of the more famous tools to use is the Fibonacci retracement that I've already marked as one of my favorites. And I use this tool in particular for ranges. So as you can see, this is not the default template to use Fibonacci. This is the more default one from TradingView itself, and this one shows the Fibonacci levels, in particular the 618 level. While this is used quite often, I do see that the tool is manipulated in such a way that the colors are not visible. The reason for that is simply because I don't see any added value to have these colors on the background, as opposed to simply those levels in check. So this one would be way more clear for me than these colors, and even more so would be to simply have them as black lines. I don't see the point of having them in colors, but of course you can visualize it in your own way. Next we can look at another tool that is used in particularly for visualizing the risk reward for a specific trade. So let's assume you would like to enter a long position around this level. That way you can visualize where your target and your stop is, and you can see the risk to reward for that particular trade. To have this more precisely, you're able to put this all in, so you can even put in an account size, the risk that you're willing to take in order to have the dollar amount that is risked or rewarded for that trade. And for me in particular, what I would do is I fill in the exact level at which I want to take profit and the particular stop loss level at which the trade setup is invalidated. Next, one of the more insightful tools that is used quite often by me is the anchored VWAP. And the anchored VWAP is simply a tool at which the volume weighted average price is calculated from a specific point that you decide until now. And the good thing for an anchored VWAP is as well that the price input can be completely dependent on how you would like to use that VWAP. So you can use it, for example, as a specific dynamic support level. In that case you can set the source to low, or as a specific resistance level at which you can use the highs of all those candles as a form of the price input. Furthermore, you're even able to let standard deviation bands be calculated and be visualized in such a way that you know how the price moves within those bands, and it would be more or less used as to see whether price moves out of those bands and potentially even have a breakout, or for a trade to short back into it. One of the other tools that I use quite often as well is the fixed range volume profile. That way I'm able to see where a lot of volume was traded at what specific price levels, and also at where there was low volume support for those specific price levels. For Bitcoin, for example, if we look at the fixed range volume profile, which is a very broad one, it's not something that I used in this way, but just as an example, you see that at the lower part, loads and loads of trading has happened. So in hindsight, what's clear is that a lot of buying has been done at these particular price levels. So it's in this period, but more importantly at these particular price levels. And you see that there are a few price levels at which there was traded as well. So this is in hindsight again, but then you can see that there was also a lot of buying in these price levels as opposed to the other ones that are near these. And lastly, you can see some more volume here, slightly more, and also at the top, and in that case it would be a selling. So it's a good way to see at what price levels there were relatively high or low volume. And if we look at my favorite tools, one of the other things that is used particularly for visual purposes are the brush and the highlighter. So with the brush you're able to simply draw something accordingly to how you move your mouse, and I use this more often when I explain something verbally. So for a video, or sometimes when I talk to a trader that I know in real life, I can simply use the brush and explain something on the go while I use it accordingly. And also for the highlighter, this is something I use in particular for marking certain places. So for example, marking a swing high or a swing low. But of course you can also even mark specific zones as well. So it's completely dependent on how you use a highlighter like that. One of the things that is used by traders as well are the patterns that are able to visualize a specific pattern that is used. So for example, Elliot wave patterns or head and shoulders can be used by this particular tool. So in this way you can, for example, point out what the left shoulder is, the head and the right shoulder, just as a broad example. And similarly for Elliot waves, you're able to point out what the impulse waves exactly are and also what the correction wave would be accordingly. One of the tools that I don't use that often but is still interesting for this video is the bars pattern tool. And this way you're able to copy the exact movements that were happening at a specific price range, or time range rather. So for example, here I copied the accumulation phase of Bitcoin before it made another move up. And if you expect Bitcoin to have a specific comparable move, so for example, let's assume that it would happen right here, then you can visualize it by moving it towards it and have an overlay of this bar pattern over the price. In that way you can also combine it with the brush to, let's say, have something like this in common, or you use another bar pattern. So you can even make a longer one and use this particular part to say that the same thing will happen after a so-called accumulation. One of the things I don't use that often are the icons or the symbols on TradingView. So one of the things that you can do is to use a magnet, for example, for the point of control. And some people use those rockets more for crypto purposes. It's more or less a fun way to say that the price may go up. And in that way you can use it in different ways. So the magnet is the one thing I may use for here and there, or the dollar sign to show where liquidity may be. But this is just one visual way. So it's this, just as many other tools, is a more visual approach to explain something that will be or can be going on in the market. Another useful tool in combination in particularly is the magnet tool. And what you can do is, let's say that you want a specific price level to be put at. So for example, the all-time high of Bitcoin. If you want the exact point of the all-time high without the magnet, then you need to move it in such a way that it is at the top of the wick. Or of course you can look at what the close is and then fill it in right here. However, alternatively, you can use the magnet mode that is specifically used for pointing out such important levels, simply because the magnet looks at the 4 data within a candle, so at the open, high, low, and close. So if you hover over a specific candle, as you can see, price moves over the low, the open, the close, and the high of that specific wick. This was part 1 of the introduction. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned from the video. If you want to learn more about TradingView, check out the second part of the introduction, which is also on the very same channel.